stop everything because what people are trying to package as just another quiet celebrity breakup between Teyana and Pierre doesn't hold up under pressure when you really start looking at the sequence of events, the timing, and the emotional whiplash that unfolded in public view. Because this didn't feel like something that simply faded out naturally. It felt like a story that was still mid-sentence when someone abruptly closed the book. And that's exactly why the internet reacted the way it did, not just with curiosity but with intensity, because people didn't witness a clear ending, they witnessed a disappearance, a shift so subtle at first that it almost slipped past unnoticed, until suddenly it didn't. And once those small inconsistencies started stacking up, they formed a pattern that was impossible to ignore, because just weeks before everything went quiet, there was a completely different energy surrounding her. A kind of grounded glow that didn't feel staged or filtered, something softer and more settled, the kind of presence that suggests emotional stability rather than performance. And alongside that energy was Pierre, reserved but present, not oversharing, not broadcasting, but still clearly part of the picture in a way that felt intentional. And that's what made the contrast so sharp when things started to change, because there was no dramatic fallout, no public disagreement, no explosive moment to mark the shift, just distance, slow and almost clinical, the kind of withdrawal that doesn't announce itself but reveals itself over time through absence, missed appearances, conversations that start to sound slightly different, moments where something that used to be naturally included is suddenly avoided. And at first people gave it the benefit of the doubt because busy schedules are normal, especially in that world, but then it kept happening, and repetition turns coincidence into suspicion. And suspicion is where the internet thrives. Because once people start looking, they don't stop at what's visible, they start filling in the gaps, building narratives out of fragments. And that's exactly what happened here, because there were no official confirmations, just pieces, a rumored voice note that no one could verify but everyone had an opinion about, alleged screenshots that were unclear but emotionally loaded, and language that sounded familiar enough to feel believable, words like needing space, being overwhelmed, timing issues, phrases that sound reasonable on the surface but often signal something deeper underneath. And suddenly the tone of the conversation shifted, because now this wasn't just two people drifting apart, it started to look like imbalance, like one person had already started letting go while the other was still holding on. And whether or not that perception was accurate almost became irrelevant, because perception itself became the dominant narrative. And once that narrative took hold, everything that came before it was reinterpreted through that lens. Old interviews resurfaced, clips that once felt warm and genuine started to feel heavy and uncertain. And one moment in particular began circulating again, her sitting calmly, smiling softly, referring to him in a way that sounded affectionate and grounded, calling him something sweet enough to feel personal. And what once read as intimacy now read as vulnerability. Because hindsight changes everything, it rewrites tone, it reshapes intention, and it can turn even the most genuine moments into something that feels bittersweet. And the public reaction followed that shift almost instantly, because audiences don't just observe stories like this, they emotionally invest in them. And when the tone changes, so does the response, and what was once admiration turned into analysis, then into speculation, and eventually into judgment, with people trying to assign roles to determine who gave more, who stepped back first, who felt what and when, even though none of those answers were actually confirmed. And in the middle of all that noise, something unexpected happened. She didn't engage with it. There was no public explanation, no emotional response designed to correct the narrative or redirect the conversation, just a controlled shift in presence, less visibility, fewer signals, but not absence. And that distinction mattered, because disappearing entirely would have fed into assumptions of retreat, but staying visible while saying nothing created a different kind of tension, the kind that suggests intention rather than reaction. And that's where the conversation started to evolve again, because silence, when used deliberately, forces people to confront their own assumptions rather than rely on confirmation. And then came a moment that seemed small but carried weight, a simple video stripped of presentation, no production, no aesthetic framing, just movement, focus, repetition. The kind of physical exertion that doesn't explain anything verbally but still communicates something emotionally. And the response to that moment was immediate, because people recognized the shift in energy, not sadness, not anger, but concentration, discipline, a kind of internal processing that doesn't need an audience to validate it. And that's when the narrative stopped being just about what ended and started becoming about what was forming afterward. And just as that shift began settling into public consciousness, the timeline moved forward into a completely different environment, the Golden Globe Awards, a setting built on visibility, performance, and carefully managed perception. And that's where everything that had been building quietly intersected with a moment that couldn't be ignored, because when she entered that space, the energy didn't match what people expected based on the story they had constructed. There was no visible weight, no hesitation. No sign of someone carrying unresolved emotion into a public setting. Instead, there was composure, clarity, and a level of presence that felt grounded rather than performative, and the cameras picked up on it immediately, because in environments like that, attention isn't random, it follows something, and in this case it followed her repeatedly, enough for viewers to notice in real time and start questioning it before anything had even happened. And then the moment arrived, her category, the shift in atmosphere, the quiet that signals anticipation rather than absence. And when her name was announced, the reaction wasn't just applause, it was a pause followed by realization, because it felt unexpected enough to register but fitting enough to resonate once it landed. And her response to that moment became the defining image, not because it was dramatic, but because it wasn't. She didn't react impulsively, didn't display exaggerated surprise. Instead, she paused briefly, as if acknowledging something internally rather than externally, and then moved forward with intention. And that walk to the stage carried more weight than words could have, not because it referenced anything directly, but because it contrasted so sharply with the narrative people had built around her. And when the camera shifted toward the audience, the absence of Pierre became part of the conversation without being addressed, because absence in a moment like that doesn't need explanation to be noticed. But what mattered more was that it didn't define the moment itself, because when she reached the stage, the focus remained on what she chose to present, not what people expected her to reveal. And in that decision, the entire narrative shifted again, because instead of confirming or denying anything, she redirected attention toward her work, her process, her presence in that space. And by doing that, she effectively removed the power from speculation and placed it back into something tangible and undeniable. And that's why the moment resonated beyond just the award itself, because it represented a transition, not from one relationship to another state, but from being defined by perception to defining the moment on her own terms. And in the end, that's what people responded to most strongly. Not the rumors, not the speculation, not even the questions that remained unanswered, but the fact that when everything around her felt uncertain, her presence didn't. And that contrast is what made the entire sequence feel larger than it actually was, because it wasn't just about what ended, it was about how the ending was handled, how the silence was used, and how a moment that could have been overshadowed by narrative instead became something that stood on its own. And that's why it continues to hold attention, because people aren't just reacting to a breakup, they're reacting to the way a story shifted without ever being fully explained. And sometimes that kind of ambiguity carries more impact than any confirmed detail ever could.